This is a shir on Likutei Sichos, Chelek Tesvav, the 15th book of Likutei Sichos, the Sicha Vayishlach, the 5th Sicha. Put on your seatbelts and get ready for a revolutionary Sicha, at least in my opinion. One of the kings, the end of the parsha of Vayishlach, we talk about the kings that ruled in Edom. One of the kings, Ashamol Chuberetz Edom, that ruled in the land of Edom, Lifnei Melach Melech Bnei Yisrael, before there were kings to the children of Israel, is Yovav ben Zerach Mibatzra, Yovav the son of Zerach from the place called Batzra. So Rashi says on these words, he says, Batzra is from the cities of Moav, as it says in the book of Yirmiyah, when it talks about the retribution in the end of days. V'al Keroyos, that there's going to be punishment on Keroyos and on Batzra, names of places. And because, continues Rashi, Lefi shehem midno melech le'Edom, because Batzra provided a king to Edom, to the Yosef dynasty, because Yovav, the son of Zerach, was from a place called Batzra, so Batzra provided that king. Asida alilkei semaim, it will in the future be punished together with them. Shenema, as we find the verse that says in Yeshaya, talking about the future, Ki zevach laHashem beBatzra. There will be a day of sacrifice to Hashem in Batzra. In other words, there will be punishment from Hashem in the place called Batzra. Why does Batzra get punished? Because they provided a king to the arch enemy of Yaakov, to Esav, to the kingdom of Esav. Asks the Rebbe, what is relevant to the pshat of this pasuk? What do we need to understand? The Batzra is from the cities of Moav. What does that give us to understand the pshat in the pasuk, the simple meaning of the pasuk? So there are commentaries that learn that Rashi is trying to answer the question, why does the pasuk have to tell us where he came from? Why does he mention Batzra? And Rashi tells us it's in order to explain to us why later Batzra suffers the same fate together with Edom, because they provided a king. Even though they weren't Edom, they provided a king to Edom. But that explanation is l'cha'ira seemingly not understood. It's not enough. Because when you hear the Rebbe in Hora 6 years says you could even say this language seemingly l'cha'ira, even if that's going to be the way we do learn in the end. I'm not sure I understand the Ha'ara. I just want to point it out because it just seems like there's something there to delve into. So here's the question that Rebbe asks. First of all, what did you answer? Why the Torah tells us why the punishment is also going to come to Batzra? Why do we need to know that here? He didn't answer the question. He just said what the Torah is telling us. But why does the Torah tell us? This is the question. We're not talking here about the future of Edom being punished. So why insert that little detail here? Base, Ve'ikar, the main question is, all of the other kings of Edom that are mentioned, except for one, it says where they come from. And none of the other ones does Rashi say any comment about it. More than that, in the last king, the pasuk adds not just where he comes from, that the name of his city was Po'u, but it says the name of his wife. The name of his wife was Mehitavel, and then it says Mehitavel was the daughter of Matred and the daughter of Meizav. And Rashi comments there, Meizav means there was a lot of gold. Gold was like Mizav. What is gold? He came from such a rich place that gold wasn't. He didn't make a big deal out of gold. And Rashi there doesn't say why you need so many indications about one king. He does say what is Meizav, but that's, as the Rebbe points out in Hara 9, possibly the reason he does make a comment there is because we're identifying the person by two names. Matred, we're saying the name is, she was the daughter of Matred and Meizav. So there Rashi explains that the explanation about gold wasn't, they were so rich that gold wasn't even a value. But the Rashi there also doesn't explain from where they come, why it says where they come from. So we have all these kings. Rashi doesn't explain why it says where they come from. Only on one of them, Yovav ben Zerach with Batzra. Why Batzra? Because Batzra is going to be part of they provided a king to Edom, they're going to be part of the punishment with Edom. So from this we understand there must be that according to Pshat, there's no question why the Torah says where the kings come from. That's just the way of the Torah speaking in the Pshat. So if so, why does Rashi make a point of explaining the Batzra one? Just by all the kings it says where they come from. Base. So we'll understand this by first understanding the biur explanation. in the pasuk that speaks about the gadlus, about the greatness of the kingdom of Edom and Yisrael. There's a struggle. It says Shnei Goyim, when Rivka has struggle in her womb, she goes to the house of Shem and Eber. She gets told prophetically, Shnei Goyim, but Vitnech, as the pasuk says, there's 2 nations in your stomach. When 2 nations will be spreading forth from your womb. 1 nation will try and struggle over the other nation. There will be a struggle between the nations. But the older one will be subordinate, will be enslaved, will serve the younger one. Now, Rashi explains that when they're talking about the struggle of the nations, Rashi says they won't be equitable in their greatness. Rather, there will be a seesaw. When this one arises, this one will fall, and vice versa. But at the end of the pasuk, where it says on the older one will be enslaved to the younger one, Rashi doesn't say anything there. So we don't understand. If we just said before that the kingdoms are going to be in a struggle, and one it's a seesaw, one goes up, the other goes down. So how can the pasuk say just in an stami, just in an unqualified statement, in a broad statement, the younger one will be enslaved to the older one. The older one will be enslaved to the younger one. Hello? That sounds like it's a constant in all times. But we just said there's going to be a struggle. So the Medrash Taka says, V'rav Yaved Soyer, the older one will be enslaved and serve the younger one. That word Yaved can also read Ye'aved, will be served by. The older one will be served by the younger one. And Rashi says it's a swinging meaning. If the younger one acts properly, the older one will be enslaved to him. If not, God forbid, the younger one will be enslaved to the older one. But Rashi doesn't bring that. That's not the way Rashi doesn't bring it. So that's not Pashtup Pshat. So what's the explanation, says the Rebbe? About Shnei Goyim bevitnech, 2 nations in your womb, Rashi says Geim Ksiv. It says 2 exalted people, 2 uplifted people, 2 powerful people. Who are those? Antoninus and Rabbi. This refers to 2 individuals. Antoninus, the great rich Roman leader, and Rabbi, Rabbeinu HaKadosh, Rabbi Yehuda HaNasi, who was Teiro Gdula, he had greatness, wealth, and great prominence, and they were both living at the same time, living next to each other. They had interactions with each other. Those are 2 great people of opposite natures coming from your womb. And then when it says about Shnei Lomim, 2 nations that struggle, Rashi says, Ein La'im ala Malchus. La'im is not talking about individuals, the individual representing Yaakov, and the individual representing. It's talking about 2 Malchuyos, 2 kingdoms. In other words, this is not just a poetic redoubling of concepts. 2 Goyim and 2 La'omim, 2 nations and 2 kingdoms. No. There's 2 separate meanings here, 2 separate concepts. Shnei Goyim bevitnech means 2 individuals. There's a Yaakov and Esav, and each one represented in the future. Antoninus representing Esav, Rabbi Yehuda HaNasi representing Yaakov. Those are individuals. And then we talk about Shnei La'omim, 2 kingdoms. That's different. So now we'll understand. Different. The next pasuk, which talks about 2 details, in other words, about a struggle and about the constant supremacy of the younger one, they're coming in continuation to the 2 kinds of concepts coming out of the room of Rivka. We have we have the nations. The struggle of the kingdoms, that's talking about the kingdom of Yaakov, Yisrael, and the kingdom of Edom. They will be in a constant struggle, up and down, seesaw. But then we talk about the individual Yaakov and Esav as they are represented later on in their progeny, their descendants, as individuals. The older will always be untertänig, will always be under and enslaved to the younger one as individuals. That's a constant. And this helps us very much understand. Look at Ara 13 that it brings from other commentaries, that Rav Yaved Soyer is not something with a stipulation, it's a constant. Yeah. And this we find also later by the brachas of Yitzchak to Yankov. He gives in the brachas of Vayishlach, he tells Yankov, you will be a master of your brother. He doesn't say it with any stipulation, only if you do the right thing. to the contrary. When Esav comes and says, Dad, give me a bracha, Yitzchak says to him, Matoy eles lecha bebracha, what possible value can you have in a bracha? I'll give you. Because anything, I'll give you a bracha. Tikna nechasim, if you buy and acquire assets, shaloyim, they're his. Because mashakana evet kana rabba, you're enslaved to him. What a slave acquires belongs to his master. So what can I give you? The only thing is, he did tell him, if they throw off the yoke of heaven, if they violate the Torah, the Yaakov kingdom, then you can throw off. You can throw off. If Yaakov doesn't listen, or Yaakov or the progeny, the sons of Yaakov don't listen, then you can rid yourself of farakta ula. You can rid yourself of his yoke from your neck. In other words, even in a time when Bnei Yisrael Chazrom don't keep the Torah, you don't get the blessings, because it's not going to help you. At that time, you're also still an Evet Yaakov, a servant Yaakov. The only thing is, you'll be able to throw off the yoke of his servitude. That, yes. And Ha'ara 18 points out that according to this, we'll understand the answer to what the Sifsei Chachamim asks, that how can Yitzchak now tell Esav that if Yaakov doesn't listen to the Torah, he'll be able to reverse things? The brachas were not given with a stipulation. Yitzchak gave Yaakov the brachas, he gave him unstipulated, unqualified brachas. Now how can he add a qualification? Only if Yaakov doesn't listen, then Esav can throw off the yoke. Says the Rebbe, throwing off the yoke does not mean that the brachas are taken from Yaakov to Esav, God forbid. It just means that the enslavement, the yoke, is somewhat reduced. But still, the brachas are Yaakov's, and Esav is enslaved to Yaakov. Fascinating concept. Comes the Rebbe and says in Eis Gimel, according to this, we have a difficulty. The Pasuk says, these are the kings that ruled in the land of Edom before there was a king by the Bnei Yisrael. So it's telling us how the kingdoms are a seesaw. That the kings of Edom, they were even prior to the kings of Yisrael. And on the contrary, and then afterwards, when the Jewish people had kings, they were able to cancel out. There was an end to the kings of Edom. So the struggle of the seesaw. When Edom was up as a kingdom, Yisrael didn't have kings. When Yisrael had kings, Edom's kingship finished. So now this poses a question. Since the concept that we just pointed out, the Verav Yavitzar, the older one, is enslaved to the younger one, and the fact that Yitzchak promised you Yaakov will be the leader, will be the owner, the master of your brother, since it's something that's a constant. As we said, in the individual people, it's a constant. Even when Yisrael doesn't, God forbid, keep the Torah, and Esav is able to throw off the yoke, but there's still this imbalance, which is that Yaakov is on top of Esav. So how could it be that that Esav had kings just like Bnei Yisrael later had kings, without any difference that should express the concept that that Yaakov is positioned on top of Esav? Always, that's a constant, right? We said the only thing you can take off is the actual yoke, but not the concept that Yaakov is always a gvir, always a master and a king over Esav. So how do we find that Esav is the exact same concept? He has kings and so on. So the Rebbe says, no, the explanation is the Parsha itself says that the kings of Edom were not individuals from Esav. They're not from Eretz Edom. The Torah is emphasizing that these kings of Edom come out not from Bnei Esav. Takim. Esav never achieves that level of mastery that he can have kings, that would be commensurate with Yaakov. And Yaakov is on top of Esav. Kings to Edom, to lead their kingdom, which we said it's a seesaw in kingdoms, but the individual came from elsewhere. The kings came from elsewhere, not from Edom, not from the children of Esav. Dalet, the only challenge to this premise is Yoav ben Zerach mi Batra. He seems to come from Esav. How does that make sense? We just said that the persona of Esav is always on the Yaakov. So how do we have a persona from Esav that becomes a king, just like later on the Yaakov people become kings, Bnei Yisrael become kings? So the Rebbe says, now we have a question. Yoav and the son of Zerach and Batra, because it sounds, Yoav sounds like he is from Edom. We know why? Because Zerach is one of the chiefs of Esav. You find him identified later on in this parsha as well, from the family of Esav. So Yoav, the son of Zerach, that sounds suspiciously like an Esav guy. How does the persona of Esav become a king? 2, in various places in Nevi'im, Batra is mentioned together with Edom. It sounds like Batra is from Eretz Edom, so it sounds like Esav did produce a king. That is negating the premise we said before that they didn't in persona. They only had a kingdom, but their kings came from elsewhere. So Rashi tells us, have no fear. Batra is not from Esav, not from Edom. It's from the cities of Moav. And he brings a proof, because there's a pasuk in Yeshaya that says Va'al Keroy, I think Yeshaya, whatever. Va'al Keroyes Va'al Batra, brings Keroyes and Batra. Where's Keroyes? All those other places mentioning Krayot, all those other villages mentioning are from Moav. And that pasuk continues Va'al Kol Orei Eretz Moav, and on all the cities of the land of Moav. In other words, Batra is a conglomerate, is a part of Moav. That's what Rashi is proving by that pasuk. And that's a proof that Yoav and Zerach Batra is not from the children of Esav. He comes from some other place, from the place of Moav. It's a different Zerach, I guess, not from the Zerach of the Esav dynasty. Itaka, so why do we find... Now Rashi has to explain. Well, strange. Why do we find that Batra is mentioned with Edom if it's really Moav? So Rashi says because they provided a king to Edom. They provided a king to Esav of the non-Esav dynasty, right? Because we said it can't be for the Esav dynasty because the persona of Esav is always under Yaakov. Can't be kingship. But they provided the leadership, so they're going to also partake in the retribution in the end. And that's why when it speaks about, where does it speak about Batra? Together with Edom, the place it talks about the Puranias, the retribution, the suffering, the payout that Hashem gives later for the trouble they made. That's where Batra is mentioned. Asida Lilkes, they will get punished together with Edom. Says the Rebbe, continues in Hey, according to what we just say now, that with the words Lafisha Mida, because they provided a king to Esav, they're going to be punished with them. And the Rashi means not just to tell us the connection of Batra to Edom, but to explain to us why Batra is very often mentioned together with Edom, although it's not part of Edom. Now we can have an answer to another diuk in Rashi. And here the Rebbe goes into a very subtle diuk, very nuanced diuk. In a word of V'gomer or non-V'gomer. When the proof is brought by Rashi that Batra is from the cities of Moav, so Rashi brings the words from the pasuk Va'al Keroyes Va'al Batra, and on Keroyes and Batra, and he says V'gomer. What does he mean in V'gomer? Va'al Kol Orei Eretz Moav, and all the cities of Moav. So we see clearly Keroyes and Batra is from Moav. V'gomer means, take a look at the end of the pasuk. It's also relevant. But in the second proof, where he says they're going to be punished together with them, he only brings the half the pasuk, and without saying, look at the rest of the pasuk. What's the half the pasuk he brings? Ki zevach la'Hashem beBatra. It's a day of, literally, of slaughter to Hashem in Batra. In other words, retribution. Without saying, look at the continuation. Now, I would say the exact opposite. The first pasuk should not have the V'gomer. Don't need the continuation. The second one we do. Why? Because it's enough to say Va'al Keroyes Va'al Batra to tell us that Batra is part of Keroyes. We know Keroyes is from the cities of Moav. We don't have to bring the V'gomer where the pasuk says and on all the cities of Moav. Right? So we shouldn't need that continuation necessarily. If you're not into bringing continuations, don't bring it. But if you are into bringing continuations, so you definitely need to bring it in the next pasuk. Because when we say that Batra is going to be punished with them, together with Edom, the proof is not really from the words Ki Zevach L'Hashem B'Batra, because it's a day of Zevach T'Hashem in Batra. That's not enough of a proof. It doesn't say anything about Edom. The continuation of the pasuk says it all. The Goymer. The pasuk continues, V'tevach Godel Be'eretz Edom, and a great slaughter in the land of Edom. In other words, punishment from Hashem and Edom. So that's what should be. He's saying that Batra is going to be punished with Edom. So say V'gomer to look at the continuation of the pasuk, which speaks feirush about the retribution in Edom. Rashi doesn't say V'gomer. So the Rebbe says, Here's why the nuance is made in this way by Rashi. The continuation of the pasuk Zevach LaHashem beBatzah v'Tevach Gadol be'Eretz Edom, that there'll be a slaughter for Hashem. In other words, retribution for Hashem in Batzah. Tevach Gadol, and a big slaughter in Eretz Edom, big punishment in Eretz Edom. You could present this as a proof against what we're saying. Why? Because if we're saying that Batzah is really from the cities of Moab and it's just getting pulled into the punishment of Edom, so it's a subsidiary punishment. So why does the Torah say it in this order? First tells us the punishment of this of the subsidiary, and only then say the punishment of Edom. So the Vegomer, if you go and look in the continuation of the pasuk, you're going to get a little tzatumot, you get a little confused, you may have a question. So Rashi doesn't bring the Vegomer. He just says the concept of punishment in Batzah is because it's attached to Edom. So what's taka the answer? How can you learn what Rashi says, that the reason Edom is punished is because it's subsidiary? The reason Batzah is punished is because it provided a king to Edom, and therefore it becomes a subsidiary attached to Edom. So why does the pasuk first speak about the subsidiary, about the punishment in Batzah, and then only Edom? The Rabbi says you could learn, and that's the way we're going to have to learn in Rashi, that the Vav and a great retribution in Edom is not actually a Vav HaMeisav, a Vav with and. It's a Vav HaMafsik. Speaking about two things, it's not joining them one to the other. I can't say I understand 1,000,000% what it means, Vav HaMafsik, I'm sorry. But it's not the and which would make the first one more important, the second one a subsidiary, because it should be reverse. It's two things. However, since you need to delve into that and to kind of establish the pasuk, and it's not so simple, Rashi just says, I don't want to confuse you with that. I don't say V'gomer. The first pasuk, the additional words, they add Va'al kol orei eretz Moab. If you look at the end of the pasuk, you see clearly Kroya is Batzah, and then it says, you don't have to know where Kroya belongs to. Va'al kol orei eretz Moab. Look at the end of the pasuk, you see Batzah is Moab. So there, it makes perfect sense. The V'gomer adds a lot. Here, the V'gomer. So you would look at, say, either do all V'gomer or do none V'gomer. No, the V'gomer there is good. The V'gomer here would create difficulty for the Mechaber Shemika to understand. So Rashi leaves it out. Look at the level of diuk. Vav. About this concept, V'rav Yaveh Tzoyer, which is said about all times, you could have a big question from the beginning of the Seder. I mean, this is, I think, not such a Talmud Chacham to know, but I think this is a big chiddush what the Rebbe is saying. The Rebbe is backing it up in hints in the Ha'aras from various Mefarshim, but the way the Rebbe puts this out, that the struggle, that's only the kingdoms are struggling. The persona, Yaakov is always on top, and all the descendants of Yaakov always on top of Esav. May I interject here with a story? Either it's applicable or not, you'll decide. There's a story famously told about somebody in the early years of the Rebbe's leadership, a non-Jew. The Rebbe would doff his hat, lightly lift up his hat, and there was another Jewish person. The Rebbe nodded his head. I think this is the story, if I'm getting it wrong. And the Rebbe explained, the person felt that the Rebbe was giving more respect to the non-Jew, and the Rebbe said, ever since I have never bowed my head to a non-Jew. So doffing the hat is a sign of respect. Good morning, but be respectful. Possibly this is exactly what we're saying. The persona of Yaakov is on top. This is a constant. This is a bracha that we have. Rav Yaveh Tzoyer. But says the Rebbe here the question: how could Yaakov? You don't find this behavior in Yaakov himself, in the essence of Yaakov. He sends messengers to Esav, and he says, "So say to my master Esav, so said your servant Yaakov." How could you say that? Your servant Yaakov said, "I'm sending this to tell my master to find favor in your eyes." Oy vavoy. As till later on in the Pasha, Yaakov sends a present to Esav. He bows to him. He calls him Adoni a bunch of times. He calls himself a servant. He calls him a master, him a servant. Hello. We just said the Rabbi he has a bracha that the younger son, the older son will always be enslaved to the younger one. This doesn't sound like an enslavement. It sounds like a reversal of roles. In Pshat, it's not a question because, hey, We know that Yaakov is scared. Why is he scared? Hashem promises him befeiros she's going to be protected. Why is he scared? Maybe I've disearned. I've become dirty with sin, and I'm not going to earn what Hashem has promised me. But Hashem said, I'm going to do good to you, right? But he was scared. So how much more so he could have fear that maybe the prophecy that was told to his mother through shame, right? Maybe that won't be fulfilled. In other words, maybe he did something to disearn that. If something he heard directly from Hashem, he's still worried when it comes to Esau. So something he heard from his mother who heard prophecy through shame, okay. He's worried that V'rav Yavid Tzoy, this prophecy that the older one will be enslaved to the younger one, maybe he did something to lose that, God forbid. A befort, the Rebbe says, it's not clear. That's not straight. It's nicht glatik. It's not smooth. And the Rebbe says, in Orah 40, by the way, we know, just remember the Rambam, who says that when Hashem says to a prophet to promise something good without stipulation, and it doesn't get fulfilled, that's a problem with the prophecy. A true prophet, that doesn't happen. If Hashem said something to a prophet good without stipulation, it's going to happen. So keep that in mind. So it's not clear to say if there was a prophecy of Igvir La'achecha and it doesn't say any stipulation and it says only when you, Yaakov, don't fulfill Hashem's will, they'll be able to throw off the yoke. Right? But the persona is always, Esav is under Yaakov, so how can Yaakov do an action which is the exact opposite? Even if he's humble and he's scared, he's sin. He calls him Adoni, my master, he calls himself servant. So the Medrash Taka finds Yaakov a shortcoming in Yaakov. It says what he did was wrong, and he was punished later. But as we said many times, since the Avos, by definition, are a Merkava, they're like a chariot to the will of Hashem. All their days, they never faltered. So we understand it's not possible to talk about the actuality of Rav, bad, God forbid, in their behavior. Can't talk about a chet, about a sin. Things that look like a sin that are pointed out to be inappropriate. It's not the simple meaning of the sin of commission, of not doing. As we Taka see in this Inyan itself. Taka Yaakov is punished for this behavior, calling him Adoni and so on. As Chazal tell us, and this, the Ramban goes ahead and says that later this becomes one of the reasons that we suffer by the Romans, become humiliated and so on. However, if this is a wrong behavior, don't learn anything from it. No, Chazal learned from this behavior. If you've never heard this statement, you're going to find it fascinating. The Gemara says, "Machnifim l'reshoim ba'olam hazeh." How do you translate machnifim? You kind of not grovel. You act. You act plastic nicely, like you say nice things to wicked people in this world for protecting the peace. You say nice things that are facetious and are not real. It's considered very fake when you say something nice to somebody which is not real. But in this world, if he's in charge and he's a Rasha and he's a wicked person, you got to curry favor with him. That's the way the world is. Chazal tell us that. Who do we learn that from? From Yaakov. When he sensed that Esau was in charge, he went ahead and he did things and he called him my master, even though he didn't believe it. So in other words, what did that tell us is, on the one hand, we're saying that Yaakov acted inappropriately. On the other hand, you can't say that. On some level, yes, you can't say that. It was a merkava. And the proof is, Torah tells us, learn from it. If you said it's inappropriate, why are you learning from it? No. So there's, like many of the paradoxes of Torah, these two things coexist at the same time. And the reason is because in Chassidus will tell us that in the source level there are two, I wouldn't say conflicting, but there are two differing ways of transmission of godly energy and creating the balance, the dwelling place for Hashem in this world. Let's understand it. Let's delve into the Chassidus now. Zayin. In Chassidus, what it's talked about is that in the source, Esav is higher than Yaakov. That's why he's the firstborn. You figure Hashem didn't know who to make the firstborn, God forbid. If Esav's the firstborn, there's got to be something where he needs to be born first. In source, he's a higher level. The fact that Yaakov is going to be refining the level of Esav. So what happens is that Yaakov now obtains, that what shines and illuminates in Yaakov is the source level of Esav. which is higher than the birth level of Yaakov. The source, the most recent source of Yaakov is lower than the primary source of Esav. When Yaakov refines Esav, what shines in him is from the higher source of Esav. And that's why we understand. Chassidus explains, what does it mean Yaakov sent Malachim Lefanov in front of him to Esav? It means he sent it to something higher than him. What does it mean he says, so I say to my master, so says your servant Yaakov? Why do I send a present to Esav? Chassidus explains, Yaakov didn't mean the persona of Esav down below, the bandit. He's talking about the source of Esav, which is higher than Yaakov. Since, however, the Medrash says that 1 second, but you see in actuality Yaakov is lowering himself before Esav down below, and that's why he gets punished according to the Medrash, we have to say that explanation is also, that meaning is also true. That Yaakov did send presents to Esav the way he is down below. And there's also meaning in that behavior in the inner track of Torah. In other words, there's two things going on. There's two things going on. Order 46 is fascinating because in the discussion of what's taking place here, Teiras Chaim says, the Alter Rebbe explains, the Alter Rebbe, when Yaakov bows to Esav, he's bowing to the source of Esav on the one hand. On the other hand, he's lowering himself to dealing with the Esav the way the bad is down here, and he's gonna refine the bad. He's aiming at his source, but he's also aiming at dealing with it down below. There's two corresponding, and I wouldn't say conflicting, but two differing things going on in the same place. And so when he sends angels to the source of Esav, why does he do that? So the way it explains in Chassidus and those sources, Alter Rebbe, Middle Rebbe, is because he thought Esav's already on the same page with him. He says, Esav, let's go, let's pull the curtain up. You go to your source, which is higher. I'm sending angels to you. Let's make a pact. Let's make a joint thing. Let's bring the Mashiach. And then when he finds out that Esav comes back and the angels come back and says, no. He's coming with 400 men he's coming with a negative energies. He's not refined. So it seems the way the Chassidus explains it, that game over. Yaakov made a mistake. That's not what is. The Rebbe says, the Avos, they're a chariot for Hashem. They didn't make a mistake. So what he did, dealing with Esav, where Esav is taka, not refined, is also not a mistake. There's also validity to it. It's another way to refine Esav, as we're going to talk about right now. Here's the explanation. There's two ways. Ches. In the victory over the negativity and in refining it, there's, generally speaking, two ways. One way is through a way, Giluy Or, turning on the light, shining the light. The Mavar, the one who's doing the refining, who's changing the reality of the negativity, draws down on the one who is trying to impress and change and refine such a high level light of Kedusha. And when there's such a high level of intensity of Kedusha, the negativity gets thrown away. We know light dispels darkness. Intense Kedusha gets rid of the darkness. And what happens is that the holy sparks therein get drawn up and the rest falls away. Another way is in a way of enclothing oneself in the negativity. In other words, the one who's in charge of the refining lowers himself to the wrestling field. And gets into the fight. Gets into the clothing of the one he's trying to change. Gets into the reality, that lowly scenario, wrestles with him, and changes the negativity to good. Each of those ways has a virtue. When you're talking about the one who's doing the refining, for sure, it's better if he can just stand from the distance and shine this intense light. He doesn't have to go down and wrestle and get a little bit dirty in this match. He's separate, protected. However, the second way, the wrestling with the negativity, when there's a closeness, he has to get engaged. He has to engage in the negativity. This could cause some kind of a diminishment in him. However, when you look at from the perspective of the one who's being refined, the object that's being refined, on the contrary. In the first way, it's being rejected. You shine on the intense light, and you basically reject what it did is it attracted the positivity, rejected total negativity. It kind of just negated it. In the second way, where we're paying attention to, there's a wrestling match, and the one who's refining is engaged in changing the one he's refining. So there's more validity, there's more attention given to the one who's being changed. In other words, that its reality shouldn't be rejected. Its reality should be transformed. So it shouldn't be a menag. It shouldn't be a opponent or something that obscures and hides kedusha. It should be able to be utilized and elevated. You're dealing, right? So on the one hand, for the mevarer, better boom from the outside, shine the intensity. But for the one who's being affected, who's being changed, if there's involvement from the one who's changing him, there's a greater and more existential, deeper, real change in the one who's being changed. Test the tachlis hakavana, the intention, the full intention of Hashem, of Torah mitzvahs, is to make shalom ba'olam, to make peace in the world. What does it mean to make peace in the world? Make peace in the world means that the opponent becomes transformed and part of the peace, not rejected, part of the peace. So when we talk about the world is usually, the world, oila means helem, obscuring of godliness. But now we want to make peace in the world, that the world itself should become refined and become holy. So therefore, the same way the Torah takes a journey from Hashem's primordial wisdom, comes down enclosed into the tree of life of good and bad. In other words, talks about how to deal with the falsity of the world and with all the trouble in the world. The Torah tells us, two people fighting, one people stealing, in order to be able to refine the good from the bad, till we find even that there's a pasuk that says V'chol malbushei egalti. In the pasuk in Yeshaya, when it's referring to the redemption, it says Hashem says about himself that I've made all my garments dirty. The word egalti also has geula in there. In other words, in order to get to the inner intention, which is geula, redemption, liberation, which is refining the klippa, the husk, right? As it says there, mizeba me'edem, batzra, who's coming from edem, and we have to refine and transform the negativity. So there is egalti, there is becoming sullied, becoming dirtied, keveyochel, so to speak. The Shechina is going into a place of klippa and has to refine it and transform it and bring it back, to liberate it, to make a peace in the world, to make a geula where there's equanimity and there's peace in the world. There's a little bit of a danger there. There's a little bit of a when you wrestle with the negativity, there's a little negativity. You get dirty. So similarly by tzaddikim, if Hashem says that about Himself, so tzaddikim are similar to the Creator. Sometimes they have to reduce their level, go down from their level, and enclose themselves in the clothing of the one who's being refined, to the extent that then they later need to rectify that they lower themselves to that extent. Hashem wanted them to do that, but then, hey, but you did the right thing, but you got a little dirty, you got to fix it, in order to make Hashem's fulfillment of Lasa Sholem Ba'olam, to make peace in the world. That's the point, that's the intention. Yud. This is also the reason I want to come back to Ha'ara. Today's Yudalit Kislev, and I'm recording it today of the Rebbe's Chasana. The Rebbe makes reference to something in the Maimer said by Frierdiker Rebbe by his day of Chasana. Let's first finish the Sikha. Yud. This is also the reason why Yaakov, we said Hashem lowers himself to bring liberation. He even gets sullied. That's why Yaakov lowers himself to Esav. Not just to the source of Esav, because the source of Esav is higher. He lowers himself to Yaakov down below. Even though, in essence, Rav Yavitzur, the older one, is enslaved to the younger one. So why is he doing this? He doesn't have to do it for his personal safety. He's doing it because he's doing a more consummate transformation of Esav. The shleimus of the refinement of Esav, the completion of the refinement of Esav, is when Esav on his own is admitting that yes, the older one needs to be enslaved to the younger one. To get to that place, there needed to be not just Yaakov shining his supremacy on him, his Gilui Ers, his light, also to enclose himself in the mindset, in the levushim of the one he's refining. And that incorporates and includes a descent of the one who's doing the refining. To the extent, yes, that we look, that the Medrash says, He got a little dirty. There's a diminishment in his level. There's a chisar and there's a lacking. But what did it result in? What did it result in? He lowered himself before Esav, but dafka through that, Esav comes and says, Achi, my brother, you should have what you have. And Rashi points out, here, he agrees to the brachas. What's the bracha? One of the brachas is that you will always be a master to your brother. He says, brother, you got it. You have that position. So he infiltrated Esav and got Esav to admit, yeah, you're the guy. I'm the subordinate. To the extent that's going to be in La'asid Lavei, in the future, when Mashiach comes, it says, when Esav offers to go with him, he says, no, I'll come see you. One day I'll come see you. That's going to be when Mashiach comes, where there's going to be the open refinement of Esav. The Zohar says it, the Rabbi quotes in R58, Yaakov de moich ruchi legabi de Esav. Yaakov lowers his spirit to Esav, begin in order. The lebosar leheve eved leit, that afterwards he should be a slave to him. Vayishlach alei, and he'll rule over him. V'yiskayim ve'yavduch amim loim, and the fulfillment of the prophecy will be fulfilled. So the Zohar Mamish seems to say that this was the intention of Yaakov. It wasn't a lowering. It was a lowering in order. It was a tactic. It was a part of the methodology of transformation of Esav. I want to go back here to Order 55. When we talk about making peace in the world, where Hashem descends in order to redeem, it says Hashem will what should we call it, tzaddikim, in order to change the world. They have to sometimes lower themselves and get involved in the confines of the world in order to change it from the inside. Order 55, the Rabbi says, similarly, the reason for the descent of the Jewish people into Golus is in order to change the darkness of the Golus itself. Says the Rebbe, this is the chidush and the advantage when we say V'rav Shalem B'Loyach. It says Shalem Rav Loyach V'Secha Tamid Chacham Mam Shalom Be'elam Shnam B'Chom Enach B'Nei Hashem V'rav Shalem B'Loyach. Tamid Chacham create peace in the world. That's Shalem. V'rav Shalem B'Loyach, and much peace is created by your children, by those that build you. Much peace is created by the Bnei Yisrael. What's the much peace? What's Rav Shalom over Shalom? There's peace and there's major peace. So he says, peace in itself is the transformation of the world. Helam. Rav Shalom, the world is just an obscures godliness. It hides it. It doesn't necessarily oppose it. But Rav Shalom and a major peace is achieved. That's already talking about the refinement of the level down from obscuring of the world. Golus opposes Kedusha. Says the Rebbe, this could be also the difference. Look at the star. Yeshlema, that this is also the difference between the refinement of Lavan and the refinement of Esav. Lavan wasn't as bad as Esav. Esav was Gevuris Koshes Yosef Lavan. He was a higher intensity of negativity than Lavan. So maybe Rav, we know that Esav is called Rav. So Rav Shloim would be the overcoming of Esav. And Shalom Ba'elam would be the overcoming of Lavan, two different levels. Says the Rebbe that according to this we can explain the chain of the topic of the Maimer B'chol Manaich in 1928, Tafresh Pei Tes Kislev, the Rebbe's Chasana, what the Friedrich Rebbe said. And in this year, that this Sikha is being said, this Vayishlach Sikha is in Tafshin Lametes. And Tafshin Lametes was 50 years of the Rebbe's anniversary. And the Rebbe here says, that's why I'm referring back to it now. It's 50 years, and 50 years is a jubilee, right? So the Rebbe says we can explain the continuation of things in that Maimer. That after that Al Friedrich Rebbe brings the Maimer, Talmid Chachamim, that the scholars are Marbim Shalim to create peace in the world. It brings that it says Shuvi Ashulamis. The Medrash says in the pasuk in Shir Hashem, it says, come back, my complete one, my Shulamis, the one that's peaceful. The Medrash says that this is talking about the Zman HaGolos. The Bnei Yisrael are called Shulamis, my peaceful one. Why are they called that? Says the Medrash, this is the nation that made peace between me and my world. As we said, the Bnei Yisrael make peace in the world. Because the inyan of Marbim Shalom Ba'elam is done through who? dafka through the refinement in the time of Golus. Right? He says, Marbim Shalom. We're talking about a major piece. This is the way the Bnei Yisrael are called Shulamis. And that's why the Medrash says, he brings to the Medrash that the Shulamis, the piece that we're talking about here is talking about the Golus time. Here's the further quote from the Medrash. The nations of the world say to the Yidden, how long will you continue to be killed and die for your God? Come join us where there's no sacrifice needed. The Yidden answer the Goyim. He says, what do you know about what we have as the peacemaking people of Hashem? Can you give us what we got at Sinai? Of course we're going to dedicate and sacrifice ourselves for Hashem, for our relationship that we got at Sinai. Says the Rebbe, if we're talking about the Bnei Yisrael, the way they are in their absolute best, that they're neherogim, they give up their lives for Hashem. As we say, the why they're called shulamis, because mashlimim nafsham, they kind of make peace in their soul, or they complete their soul, being one with Hashem by giving up their lives for Him. Why do they even have to answer the nations of the world? Who cares? Say what you. The nations are saying, "Come join us." Why you sacrifice Hashem? Why honor that negative ummah ha'olam with even an answer? Says the Rebbe, because the Mesiras Nefesh of the time of Golus has to be in a way where the Golus itself understands, where the Golus itself is refined. That's why they have to answer the ummah ha'olam, and through that, the ummah ha'olam nations of the world, the maskimim, they internalize, they agree with the Mesiras Nefesh of Bnei Yisrael. So in other words, the Rabbi is saying that there's Talmid Chacham Bar Shalom, there's the Shalom that Torah makes in this world, but the further descent, because world doesn't have to be Golus. World could just be an obscuring. It's kind of, parv. The fact that we're in Golus where there's a darkness, that brings out our greater power. V'rav shloim banech, marbim shalom b'elam. The greater piece, the refining of Esav, which is represented by Rav. Tzloch Rabbi and the Avodas HaKodesh. Mashiach now.